I'm going to talk today is just purely out of experience, and it's got nothing to do with therapies or therapists or just reading from the books or the internet and all that.
Yeah.
Sorry. And experience of having worked, agree or maybe not agree, but this is going to be my experience.
Yes.
Right. So, yeah. My biggest sort of challenge over all these years has been the acceptance on part of the parents. The students were never a problem. It was always the acceptance on part of the parents, whether they were small. And sometimes the acceptance did not go right even when they have grown up. Yeah. It had so much to do with the social process and the family non-acceptance. So once we got over that fact, we were able to deal with the student in a way that we thought was the best way of doing so. But it had to come from the parent that, yes, my child has a challenge. The challenge might not be like visually, which is not visible, right? For Down syndrome, of course, you would be able to recognize with the physical features that, yes, this is a Down syndrome child, right? But it may not be with other disabilities, right? Yeah.
And so it's very important that we started by saying that acceptance is key from the point of caregivers, so that even as a caregiver listening to this, they're going to go through the thought process of where they are at with regards to processing their child's disability or diagnosis.
Yes.
So thank you for bringing out that. So in today's discussion, we would love to discuss the behavioral and emotional challenges that individuals with Down syndrome experience. We are leaning so much to Down syndrome because this month has been Down syndrome awareness month. But of course, it doesn't limit us because you can't separate these disabilities because sometimes they co-occur. So it's not a limit. So the most interesting comment I came across, I was reading some articles, and the one thing that I came across was a note that said that at least half of children or individuals with Down syndrome experience a mental challenge, like a mental health challenge at some point in their lives. So we are looking at depression, anxiety, ADHD. So how is that based on your experience?
Those challenges actually come in as soon as they get into puberty, adolescence. So most of the challenges start at that time. But it is interesting that how some students can even experience it much earlier. Parents need to understand the fact that there is a lot to do between emotion and learning, right?
Yeah.
We never realize even a 5-year-old Down syndrome individual would be going through a certain emotion, and we are trying to teach this child something. And we need to understand that this child might not be neurologically mature, right? And we, as parents or as educators, we do need to understand that, yes, I am trying to teach this child how to dress up, right? But this child is not neurologically mature enough yet to go to the toilet, pull down the pants, and then do his job, right? So we have to be really clear about as to where does this child stand. Does this child is still working at 2 years and could be 5 years old, and you are trying to teach this child to do numbers, you know.
Mhm.
And so what happens is the behavior obviously is going to be frustrating, is
Yeah.
going to be, uh, they are going to feel different, especially when they begin to get to be 10 years or 12 years. I always feel when my Down syndrome students get to be about 10 or 12, they understand the fact that they are different. you know I know there is a lot of stress of putting our students into normal school systems, which is fantastic. They can be amongst normal students, be able to observe what other students do, but at some point they do begin to understand that they are different. And a lot of behavioral um, challenges come when they realize that, hey, you know what, I can't do this while the others can do this. So, what happens is that they begin to behave in a way by withdrawing from that learning. They begin to behave by just being on themselves, by themselves, or they can begin to behave by seeking more attention from their teachers, or they can just become very rebellious because um, they're not being able to do this task. This task was very difficult. Or, when you want to teach an adolescent or any student with Down syndrome, you have to follow a step by step program. You cannot just jump from, a child coming with diapers, and the next thing you are just sort of putting the child on the toilet and then expecting the child to learn this. Or an adolescent, you know, who is having a neurological change and a challenge. You can't expect this child to begin to write a sentence, right? Because this child needs to go through a step by step program so that they begin to understand and relate to what they are being taught, considering the fact that they are emotionally ready to learn. Yes, and this emotion is also to do with the anxiety and the depression of their students, because if they realize, hey, the teacher is trying to teach me to do sums, right? And but this child could be having an auditory um, spatial challenge. So he's not being able to space these words or put these words together. But we need to understand that these challenges could be present emotionally. And because they are present emotionally, learning is not taking place. And since learning is not taking place, it's obviously going to take them through anxiety. And some of them, actually, my experience has really taught me that some parents, due to their unacceptance of the fact that my child is not going to be able to learn at the same rate as a normal child, they are so convinced that I am going to make sure that my child learns at the same rate as other students, because they haven't accepted that fact that there is going to be a little immaturity and a little bit challenge and a little bit delay in learning. So they push their child so much, taking them from one school to the other school, changing them to another school, doing therapies, taking them for various programs, that so much is being pumped into this child's brain, and this child's brain is not ready for this, right? And what happens, I've actually experienced some 12, 14-year-old, 18-year-olds whose parents have pushed them so much because they want them to be like everybody else. They don't want them to, other people to think that my child is different. So what happened at about 18-year, 20-year-olds when then they get into adulthood? They actually get into a block. They block themselves because so much has been given to them. And then they become rebellious. They become agitated. They are frustrated because they're constantly being, you got to do this. You have got to do this. You have to do this. You have to do this. At the end, it's all like, I'm not going to do any of this.
Yeah.
Right? So all the anxiety and all the depression comes in. And I have seen at least four of them whose parents have pushed them into like every possible therapy and name it, music and horse riding and art and Kumon and everything. And now this child has just decided to block themselves out. They do not want to leave home. All they want to do is just sit by themselves and watch TV, right? So this is all depressive, it's all anxiety. And so parents need to understand the fact that my child needs to go at his or her own developmental and neurological maturity, right? So I think I've said quite a lot, Teresa.
Actually, and like when you was talking about it mentally, I'm just thinking, well, so there's this bias, I think I'll call it bias or something, where we assume Down syndrome babies are always happy because when you're hanging around them and they're just in the place where they are safe emotionally, like they express love so much, they just, they're just beautiful. So I'm just like, there's the part where we disregard that they also have a side of them that processes and realizes when they're not able to achieve um, milestones, or they're not able to catch up with other people. I'm like, I actually didn't even think about that as a caregiver, as a sibling, caregiver, and a friend to someone who has Down syndrome. So I'm like, yeah, I think we need to stop assuming they're always happy because they always look happy. Like Down syndrome individuals are they're just
I
friendly.
know. I know. They are very, very cute. They are beautiful. They're always happy and
They're
they always
cuddly.
want to dance and sing and all that. But just remember the fact that, as soon as you bring them into a society which is doing normal things, you know, they might just withdraw, might just withdraw. I remember having a student, and this child had practiced to do a certain dance uh, for us at the one of the music festivals, and he was a fantastic dancer, and he was completely taught to dance, and he loved dancing. Honestly, Teresa, we were like, wow, he's going to perform, and we're going to be like, we're all ready. As soon as he stood on the stage,
They
blank,
disappeared. Yeah.
blank. You know, I myself tried to join him on the stage along with the dance teacher.
Nothing.
Nothing. Yes. And so, I mean, there's so many examples like that I can give you that they will be very, very happy hugging. And hugging is something that I have been very, very against because we've had some nasty experiences of our older students hugging strangers. And sometimes hugging cannot just be hugging special child. Somebody can take a hugging as
Something else.
something, as another emotion,
Yeah.
right? So hugging, at least at at Circle Academy, hugging has been banned. Really,
Yeah.
we always tell them you've got to wish good morning, good afternoon, or goodbye, or good morning, teacher, or you know any greeting of the day. But obviously, physical um, touch has completely been not
Mhm.
my way of working with them. Because when they are little, you say, hey, come, come, come. They're so cute, you say, hey, come, 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 I give you a hug. Come, I give you a hug. And then suddenly when they become adolescents, you say, you're not allowed to hug. Yeah.
So they can't
And then,
understand why all of a sudden something
and
that was is not
you
okay.
have to tell this person that, hey, I was hugging all my 10 years and now I can't hug this man. Yeah, or even a woman. Yeah. So I will tell you a very funny story about hugging and behavior and anxiety and just just the fact that how do you begin to discriminate the fact that this is not the acceptable behavior and this is the acceptable behavior. We
Mm.
used to walk, I think she was 17-year-old, and we used to walk this girl down the road because I used to live near the school. So one of my teachers used to walk this girl, very friendly, smiling and carrying the bag, and home every afternoon because the morning in the parent would drop this girl. She's a biggish girl, our Down syndrome are like they love their food, and so one of those days she was being walked home and she saw this man selling bananas on the way. So this girl actually stopped by force, yeah, to hug this man selling the bananas, right? Believe me, he just left the bananas and ran, right? And so she was taken home, and my teacher came to school. She goes, I am never going to walk her home. You don't know what happened today. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that's true. Because he must be just wishing her and asking her, do you want to buy bananas or something? And she took it very friendly,
Yeah.
decided to give him a hug. And that for me was an eye opener. And I thought to myself, ooh, we have been saying, hey, come, 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 come. Wonderful. You've done great work. Give me a hug. And
Yeah.
then now it's like, no, you're not supposed to hug.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a big behavior problem that we have in them. As professionals, we try and use some of our therapies to improve behavior, especially when it comes to behavior connected with hyperactivity. Yes. So we do follow the books sometimes. And of course, we need to have that knowledge as to how to do it. And sometimes we just have to do it by ourselves as to depending on the environmental factor. As a result of that cause, the behavior took place. And as the face this behavior. So if you follow these three principles behavior, but you got to know what was the trigger, right? If the teachers
Yeah.
or the parents at home can identify a trigger, right? You can then say, see what happened as a result of this trigger. Was it because the child was because it could be maybe the child's work that was given to the child was too hard or too difficult or too boring. So it was a trigger. As a result, this child threw the books, pushed the chair, and just leave the room, right? So those were the consequences that happened because of we did not give the age appropriate learning material to this student, right? So we have to understand what triggers this behavior. Behavior will not just come out of the blue. There has to be something, and that will cause it. And then, of course, teachers and parents have to face the consequences of it. And then we are always like, I don't know why my my daughter, she's always pushing away the books. She doesn't want to even do the coloring, or she doesn't even want to look at them. There are three principles of behavior that most professionals use, and these are, we always feel that for any behavior to take place, there has to be a trigger, and we call it an antecedent. And that trigger, if we can recognize that trigger, a trigger could be anything. It could be food, some learning material, somebody sitting next to them, wanting to go to the washroom, any trigger that would cause a bad behavior, and not necessarily bad behavior, but a change in behavior.
Yes.
And as a change in that behavior, the teacher or the parent has to face the consequences because of that trigger,
Yes.
right? So now we have, these are the three principles that we often work on. And it has worked really well for us, especially with some of the students with Down syndrome, especially when they are at about 8, 10, and sometimes even younger. You know, they just don't tend to stay on a task long enough to finish it, or they just tend to just walk around, or they just tend to bother some other students, or they just tend to push their food away. And it's got a lot to do with attention seeking, right? It's got a lot to do with emotion. It's got a lot to do with appropriate skill that has been given to this student. We always think that, oh, okay, it's good, it's art class, and so all my students, every Down syndrome child is different. When you do a group thing, you actually understand how different they are from each other, right? But you try and do an activity which you feel that most of them will be able to do it. It could be art, and it could just be free painting, like just take a brush and you know
Paint whatever.
but yeah, but we fail to understand that in this fun of doing this together, because we think this will be something that they all will be able to do, whether they are working at a maturity level of 8 years or a maturity level of 12 years or 5 years, they can all do this. But we forget the emotion behind it. There's one sitting there who hates to be dirty, right? And because this one does not like to be dirty or have paint, you know, all over, as a result, push the chair, push the paint, everything goes on the floor. What was the trigger? We never
Yeah.
realized that this child does not like to be dirty, and this child should not be given a task that involves getting their hands dirty. And as the behavioral modification therapy goes, we had to face the consequences of having to withdraw this child from this activity, and of course clearing up all the mess and everything else, and the disturbance that caused to the other students, right?
Yeah.
So I
Yes.
always say, if you want to modify a behavior, try and recognize the trigger. If you can recognize the trigger, and once you've recognized the trigger, make sure that everybody concerned around this student is familiar with this modification therapy, right? Now, from that, what we decided, of course, was that we would not give anything that would make this child's hands or clothes dirty. So we would give this child something, a different activity. It could be something to do with weaving or stitching or something like that, something that is neat and tidy. So the behavior was calm, no hyperactivity, enjoyed the activity and all that. So this trigger is so important to recognize that, and we must recognize their strengths. Really,
Yeah.
we all know that how much Down syndrome children, they love to dance and sing, and sometimes not.
Yes.
You get that emotion behind it,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
like I told you, that this one went to the stage and complete block.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it really depends on, um, as a school, when we decide to do our modification, behavior modification of a certain student who is playing up, we will all sit down and decide that this is what we are going to do. So there was a student, and once she joined us, she would absolutely refuse to sit in the class or do any skill or anything really. She would just stand around the perimeter of the school and just look here and there. Number one, it was attention seeking. Yeah. Number two, it was emotion. Number three, we did not know her strengths. Yeah. Number four, we did not know what was causing her not to be with the other students. It could be a social factor, right? She could have been bullied, she could have some medical condition and all that. Yeah. Although we take the information from the parents, but sometimes parents don't tell us
Yeah.
everything. And then we have to recognize it ourselves. So we as a team decided that when this girl was not going to be a part of the group learning experience, we were all going to ignore her. If she was standing just around the perimeter of the school, nobody will come and tell her, please come into the class. So we all decided we would just let her stand there, even if it meant a whole day, one whole week, right? And honestly, it did not take more than 3 days. She
Yeah.
realized that, nobody is asking me to go there. So she walked into the classroom by herself. All she was seeking was attention. And if we had gone to her and told her, come into the class, we were doing exactly what she wanted us to do,
Yeah.
right? And that gave her, yeah, you see, I am, I have succeeded in getting their attention,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So when you use these modification behavioral therapies or techniques, you need to really do it as a group. And everybody at home also, we told them the same thing. We had a parental meeting with with the parents, and we said when she plays up and she doesn't want to do anything, completely ignore it unless the child is hurting himself or is doing damage to the environment. Then it's a completely different story. We must understand that
Oh, good.
a lot of from frustration from being different, and a lot of hereditary problem, a lot on the parents for being overprotective. Okay, we are going out, put on your shoes, put on the shoes. Promptly, let them think for themselves. Break time, they must know they have to have food. Prompting values.
So, the one thing I wanted to ask you was the moment you realized that with your students you had not established the boundaries within which they can maybe interact with people, so that calm is not a conditioned word for hug somebody. At her age, given that now she was maybe 10, 11, 12, like how did you work around that for them now, for her to start understanding their
Yes,
boundaries? Mm.
yes. It was very, very slow process, very slow process. And they still hug, right? They still hug. But we've slowly tried to say, before they hug, you say, good morning, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you don't wait for them to come to you. Just as they're approaching, you say, good morning, or you do the sign of the good morning, and then they, they will say good morning. So you have to act before they act, right? So, and then they get used to it, and then they'll come, and then they'll just sort of get, but it's a process.
And
Yes.
assuming I want to pay a visit to your institution and I'm meeting your students for the first time, will you brief me, or like to ensure there's a continuity of what you're trying to teach the kids? Mm, how do you work around that when it comes to the visitors who are coming into the institution and the parents and the relatives? Like, yeah.
To keep a continuity? You mean
Yes.
keep a continuity? Yes.
Mm.
Some of the students have been with us like for 20 years, you know.
Oh,
Yeah. So what we've done for our students as they grow older, we have one whole section of the school which is on skill training. Yes. So, and the skill training has been fantastic, both emotionally in the fact that they, when they learn some, for example, I mean, in this skill training continuity, we decided to bring in some of the skills which we felt that might be appropriate and might not be difficult and will not be dangerous. So we brought in stitching, we brought in culinary skills, we've brought in carpentry, and the carpentry has worked amazing for us. They've just realized that, but as we keep a continuity of to this, we want to teach them a skill so that even if they go out, they have a skill that they have learned, right? Even if they want to do a culinary skill. So keep a continuity. And behaviorally, it works so well. You should see them chopping the carrots or chopping the matoke or chopping the skuma. It's so they're so much concentrated on their activity because that's an activity they want to do. And say with the carpentry, of course, we have to be very careful with the tools that we use, but nailing and sanding and taking the measurements and all that, they are doing an amazing job. So that's how we do keep a continuity of having to keep them occupied and yet a skill that they enjoy, right? And we've realized how much they enjoy these skills, and in accordance, we let them join that group of students who will
yeah.
enjoy these skills. So the continues, and it's
Okay.
interesting that some of them just stay with us. Like I told you, after having achieved this skill, getting them into employment. I mean, we want to, but there are certain things we need to teach them before we let them out into the world, right? And this doesn't need to come from school only. It has to come from home, quite a lot from home as well. They have to be taught these social skills. They have to be taken out, right? Parents must always take their child with them wherever they go, no matter whatever behavior or whatever. But the child must be accompanied by the parent. And just as we are talking about a continuity of having these students over here, we have tried integrating some of our highly functional Down syndrome students into normal school systems. Believe it or not, it didn't work. Yes. Even though they were, and we did it in a way that we did the transition very, very slowly. We did the transition in a way that the child would not feel is in a different environment and we made sure that one of the teachers kept going back, or we let them carry some of their favorite books or something so that they feel that feel of security. But I remember visiting one of the days that to see how they were doing, and I found one of the attendants holding the hand of my student and taking my child to the washroom. And I was like horrified. I said, we have worked on this for the last 12 years. You have to just orientate my child that this is where the washrooms are. When you need to go to the washroom, just, do the sign of going to the washroom and you may go. And they were so scared that the child will wander off or something like that. But which I understand that, of course, but holding the child's hand and then taking him to the washroom and all, well, it was just going back.
Yeah.
There's nothing, nothing was. And then one of those days we got a call from the parent to say, could he come back? Yeah. So I know everybody is not for special schools. We all want our children to be in integrated school systems, which I think they should. I have absolutely nothing against it, but at some point or the other, they need to have this one-to-one and in an atmosphere where we understand their emotion and learning and the connection between the two. Yes. So that's how we keep a continuity, and parents want to keep them with us as long as they want to. We have no limitations, and we will keep training them to a point when we feel that, yes, now we are satisfied and we can let you join an acceptable institution who will understand this student and let them join for employment and be self-reliant. Yes.
So the other question I wanted to ask you was, because you have these kids for years and sometimes they come when they're so young and then they grow up into teenage. So what are the signs that you look out for to know when you, so that you're able to know that maybe the child is starting to suffer from depression, anxiety? What do you look out for?
We normally look out, this student will normally will look very kind of lost in their own thoughts, and they will normally be looking down, and they are like really not with whatever is going on. And yet this child was a highly functional student, and suddenly we find that now this child is sometimes it's just looking down, or is just from their eyes you can see that they're not really with the environment. And we because we've known them for so long, so we immediately get back to the parents that, is there something that happened at home? Why is he not responding to the classwork or whatever we are doing? Is always looking down, or is being fidgety, or just not eating his food properly, or does not want to eat, So all those signs are of an emotion that is either anxiety or depression. It could come mostly from home. There could be some kind of bereavement at home. There could be family breakups at home. There could be sickness that's bothering this child, or just this child might just be having some kind of biological breakdown. But we can recognize the signs very, very quickly once they are going into anxiety and depression. Yeah. But mostly comes from home. Yes. Yes. And especially when a lot of prompting is being done, this prompting of by the teachers and the parents, the prompting really needs to be kind of reduced, right? So if there is bereavement at home, or if there's a family breakup at home, or somebody is abusing this child at home, right? So when they come to school, they are still in that same state of mind. So we have to have parental meetings and or something. Something is not right. Could you find out what it is? Because it's definitely not from school. It's something it's coming from home. Please, could you? So sometimes the parents say, yes, we were having a divorce, or somebody passed away, or we have a sick parent at home, so we haven't been able to give this him attention. And so that kind of thing can really sort of affect these students. Otherwise, they are happy. They're happy students, yes. And just as we talk about all this, we must talk about their diets, which is really, again, a very big factor. Your child could have bringing, if there is something coming from home, the parent doesn't have so much time for this student. And so they come packed with a food that was probably made last night and packed and brought. And as soon as you open the box, it's smelling and, it's just not right. So this child is obviously not going to eat it. And this is going to continue until we have to tell the parent that this child is not eating. Why is this child not eating? Because I did not have time to cook for the child. So the maid is probably just cooking something and just packing it and giving it to this child. And we all know how diet is important for our students: fresh vegetables, fresh fruits, and them being given the right medications, them being on omega-3s, and being given proper, freshly cooked food, nutrition. They can't have skuma and ugali being given every day and being brought to school. And when we vomit, we feel bad giving it to the student. And the student is trying to eat and you can see is not enjoying it. Yeah, so these are some of the factors that lead to them getting depressed, just blocking themselves out from things that they use. We do a lot of sports and we learn music, lots of all those things. And suddenly we find this child doesn't even want to dance, is always looking down and is in his own world. And we all are aware of the fact that some of the Down syndrome students do at some stage try to have some autistic features, because they tend to sort of just drift away into being unsocial and just they prefer not to socialize. So those are the things we need to look out for, that does not happen.
Thanks for that. You've actually answered the next question I was going to ask you about, like what parents can do to help you as a teacher, because then again, it has to start at home for it to cascade to school and environment. So parent involvement is very key. You answered that question that I was about to ask you for how parents can meet you halfway. I think I don't have any further questions unless there's something that you would want to add, which I think you do.
There's so much, I can talk about, because there's so much experience that I've got. One of the things I must stress on is that try not to have overstimulating environment, right? When I say overstimulating environment, so many things around. TV, computer, toys, sports. So you are like, So the child will
Yes.
first pick up the football. Ah, boring. Let me watch a program. Ah, boring. Let me pick up this. Yeah. Overstimulation is really, it's going to confuse, even it's going to confuse me. Yeah. So let's try and have things around the student that are appropriate. Yes, yes. And things around them that they enjoy. They're not that they're completely confused, that they jump from one activity to the other activity to the other activity. Okay. Oh, and the other thing I would like to mention over here is on in the ADHD, is that ADHD is more of a myth than it's a reality. You know, whole program on the TV is not an ADHD child, right? Just because this child is moving from activity to activity, running, jumping on, unless that they are medically confirmed that yes, they have some kind of a chemical imbalance causing the hyperactivity, only then we label them as being ADHD. Otherwise not. ADHD can be completely controlled with behavioral modification. It can be controlled by environmental factors. It can be controlled by diet, very important. They should be given medication only if approved by a medical practitioner, because giving the medication actually reduces their response to outside stimulation now, because this medication has been given to them. So yes, just a little bit to add it onto the ADHD. I thought it was important, but I'm sure there are a lot of professionals out there to add a lot more to it. These are just my personal experiences.
Which are very insightful, to be honest, because then again, like having lived and interacted with these children for decades, is very helpful. When I had a sister who was living with Down syndrome, and during the trips to hospital, what we realized is a lot of times the medics and everybody who is not part of our family will rely on what we are telling them for them to be able to be there for my sister. But so you realize the importance of having or being involved in your child's life, because even at school or at home, anywhere, the first point of contact is family. So everybody else will rely a lot on what you're giving them or about the children. So I think we'll come to the end of our discussion today at that point, because can see that Amar had a problem with her internet. However, if you would love to get more of what they do, you can contact the Down Syndrome Society of Kenya, and they will get in touch, or they'll help you to get in touch with Rose. And from there, you can get more information about Amar, the institution that she runs, that is Circle Academy, and any other assistance that you may need with regards to your child who's living with Down syndrome, or even any other developmental disability. Rose and DSSK can be a good point of contact. So until next time, be safe and make good choices.